Jeff's here. May I have a motion to come out of closed session and a certification that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Please cast your vote. Do we, yeah.
Who is missing?
Nelson, Randy, okay.
And that's it? Okay.
I got no light.
All right.
Because you guys requested from last night.
Okay.
Good.
Okay, there we go.
Yep.
All right, thank you. And the motion passes 6 with 1 absent. Thank you. And now we are in a session for the discussion of the language to come back for the Education Task Force for Education in the City of Lynchburg, pre-K through 12 and beyond. Thank you. Ms. Severcek.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. During your May 28th work session, council proposed revisions to the charter for the Task Force on the Future of Education in the City of Lynchburg, pre-K through 12 and beyond. And the major revisions are highlighted, well, all of the revisions are highlighted on the track changes copy of the charter that you have. But the highlights of the revisions include increasing the steering committee from 4 members to 6 members. The chairperson and vice chairperson will have experience in community leadership and will not be chosen from either the school board or council. This is intended to promote independence of the task force's leadership and enhance the objectivity of the report. Number 2, clarity regarding the deliverables of the subcommittees and task force. Number 3, language noting the task force will be inclusive and reflective of the city's demographic. And number 4, a more specific but less aggressive timeline for the work of the task force. We are hoping after you have reviewed this and discussed it that you will approve this charter that we will then send up to the school board for their consideration. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Verchek. Is there any more presentation or anything on it? All right.
Reed and I are both here to answer any questions you might have.
All right, council members, do you have questions on the revised language? Councilmember Wright.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'll just say up front that I've shared my concerns with the charter as presented with Ms. Severcek and Dr. Wodeka. And so I'll just share them quickly with you here. The first is that I think that the charter should explicitly state that information requested by the task force of the schools in the city is should be provided transparently and in a timely fashion. Because I'm worried that if we don't say it in the charter, that the task force has a right to information, even if providing that information is uncomfortable for either body or institution, that the task force get that information and that they not be stonewalled. And so I think we should establish that baseline, and I think that should I read it? All right, so thank you, City Manager, for drafting some language to be included, and if it's okay with the other council members, I suggest that we do include it, which is both City of Lynchburg and Lynchburg City School staff will be responsive and transparent in responding to requests of the task force. In the event the task force does not receive information requested of staff in a timely manner, the task force chair should be notified and will discuss any concerns with either the superintendent or city manager. Any concerns with that? No? Okay. Go ahead.
We're proposing that be inserted in the section called Scope of Activity and Responsibility.
Thank you. Great.
Thank you for the updated deliverables. I think that spells it out very nicely.
All right, Councilmember Wright.
Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No worries, no worries. I hate to admit that I've got kind of a long list. Not too long, sorry. I know you looked. So another item I was wondering about, and I was curious to have a conversation with the council about, is whether or not we should have an even number of members on this task force. You know, what if there's a subject of division, and should we then have an odd number?
I would say an even number of members is fine, because then you're going to have to come to some sort of consensus on something like this. You wouldn't want to have such a closely divided You wouldn't want to have a 4-3 vote on something that's this big. Kind of like the argument about healthcare reform or something like you want to, or Social Security reform. You want to have a broad consensus so that it doesn't get changed the next council that comes around. So I think an even number would kind of help force that. I don't anticipate it being a problem, but if it was, I think an even number would help force it.
Everybody agrees? Okay. Good, thank you. Also, the charter says that any funding requests from the task force should be directed to the governing body, but doesn't say which governing body. Presumably
Governing body that's charged with money.
with money. Well, but I feel like it should state explicitly where those,
Yeah, I was gonna say, it has to be presented to the school board in order to be presented
Sent
to
to
us
us.
first, so, right,
just whatever that change should be, I feel like it should be spelled out.
right.
So what is that? Is it presented to the school board then?
Should be to the school board, actually.
Right.
Even though we
Presented
give
to
them the money.
School board, and then they have to, right,
So then instead of governing body, it should be strike and put the school board. I'd be fine with that.
right.
And then in the paragraph on task force membership, it talks about the task force being represented in the community's diversity, but it only mentions race, age, and gender. Those are the only 3 metrics of diversity that it talks about. And obviously, we know that there are a number of different types of diversity in our community. Faith tradition, sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, right? These things are really important and notable attributes of our community. And if we're going to talk about diversity in this document and spell out what they are, I think we should probably include.
Versus just going the other direction, and being all at the risk of being an exclusive list. Why don't we strike all those and just say in respect to diversity, and that way it's an inclusive word.
I'm certainly, that's fine.
And I think that was the discussion during the
You're gonna miss something.
leadership, we had diversity.
Yes and no, right? I mean, part of the reason I think you don't want to I think the reason some people would say you should actually spell it out is so that some people don't get left behind. It's explicitly enumerated that that various constituencies and differences matter and are accounted for. That's why a lot of government entities do list it out. Because then it's being very direct and clear that when we talk about diversity, we're not leaving people out.
So maybe we need a section for definitions.
Well, and maybe,
Footnote, I mean, that's not uncommon.
Councilmember Pero's suggestion solves the problem. That we just say, like, look, we respect diversity in all its forms. We're not gonna go into laying out what diversity means to the city of Lynchburg here. Maybe that's, but I guess I object to listing only a couple,
Only a few.
but not the full suite.
Can we maybe seek the advice of Mr. Irwin on that?
Well, I mean, I think what Turner said, I think would be great. I mean, just take it out, because you don't want to say,
it
well,
open.
we want, to discriminate
As
against
we heard today, diversity
Norwegians.
means different things to
We
different
can't
people.
discriminate against Presbyterians, or, I mean, you can go on the list of, so I think excluding, or I mean, taking out
Leaving it
is.
open to just diversity.
I'm fine with that, provided we don't list only 3.
Okay, that's fine,
So don't list any, is what.
right.
And I think that's all I've got. Sorry, thanks, everybody.
All right, no problem. Thank you. Any other further questions around that?
Just a quick question to Robin. Did
you
you
Oh.
have something? Did you have your?
iPad, yes.
Yeah, I think we're looking at something that I have no idea what we're looking at. So I'm sorry.
He's got the ability to charge over here also.
Oh, that's right.
I know I've seen the language. I don't see the new, Ms. Severcek.
Now, I just wanted to remind Councilmember Wright that he did have one more thing.
Is this the deliverable question?
Hey, where are we on this thing now?
The del-
Yeah,
I think we
right.
clarified the deliverable piece, so that,
Yeah,
I
thought-
clarified that with you, but the timeline, the 10-year forecast versus 15-year forecast, did you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I didn't, I felt satisfied with the answer that you gave, but it might be valuable to share it with them. So I had asked Ms. Severcek, there's only one place in the charter where it actually lists out any kind of timeline. and it's on the financial forecast, and it says the financial group should do a 15-year forecast. But nowhere else when we say, this should go out and craft a roadmap, roadmap for what? What's the timeline? But in this one section, we're saying 15 year. I asked why 15 years as opposed to 10 years or 20 years? Why is that the number that we're holding the task force to? And so I posted, and I thought the answer was sufficient. So maybe Mr. Virchuk, you'd like to share with that?
Sure, we thought 10 years was, so the first 5 years we think will align with the school's new strategic plan. 20 years ago, when we had a CIP task force, it was a 10-year horizon, and then we thought we could be a little more visionary with the task force and go out 15 years.
Thank you.
Any thoughts around that? Questions? I heard a
I guess it just, you can throw out words with, 15 years is more visionary, but it's also more opportunity to be way out of kilter too. Hopefully we're looking at things that are, factual, so that's.
I think those points are a good point, though. If we're looking at 15 years on the financials, but from the whole plan, how's the whole plan go look? What's typically for the comprehensive plan? Does anybody know?
The comprehensive plan.
Is that 20 year?
The comprehensive plan
No,
is
it's not
supposed to
20
do
years.
every 2 years.
Every 2 years?
Every 2 years until the next.
But what's the horizon?
So the time horizon going forward, it may be 20 years, it may be
Yeah.
15 years, but they're supposed to do it every 2 years.
Understand, yeah.
And
But
it- which-
I'm just saying if it's a 20-year planning cycle is a consistent planning horizon, then maybe we should, overall, this should be a 20-year planning horizon. And if the finance side, it needs to be 15 for whatever specific constraints, because just like you said, the further out you go, the less accurate you're gonna get. And I don't know what the Weldon Cooper reports go out to, but it makes sense that there would be one kind of planning horizon that everybody's working around. I think that's logical.
And Mr. Virchuk had said that, instead of us saying in the charter what it should be, let the chair and the committee decide how they want to define that horizon.
based on what they find.
But I have no strong feelings in this regard.
Okay, yeah, that'd be fine. Put it back on the committee. Get them to decide what the horizon is, give them some direction on the finance.
And there's
I'm good with that.
there's some language, I think, in the charter that sort of says they will submit a report that lays out something to that effect.
Product, it says the final report will include a proposed timeframe for implementation of task force recommendations.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
All right, so if there's no further discussion, and are we all okay with that language with the revisions that Councilmember Wright has made today? Are we prepared to vote on this? All right, can I have a motion? Oh, did you say?
Well, no.
Okay. Can I have a motion then to adopt the Education Task Force for the City of Lynchburg, pre-K through 12 and beyond, verbiage as presented by the city manager with the revisions made by Councilmember Wright and the discussion that we've had today?
So moved.
All right, second. Thank you. Please cast your vote. Oh, I'm sorry.
Just a question on the motion. I like this. I think the changes that have been made are good changes. I think it makes it a better document. I really like the deliverables that puts a specific onus on what the task force is supposed to present, and also the schedule gives it suspense. So I think all those are good. The only question that I've got, because I had to step out during this discussion earlier, were Councilmember Nelson's
Yes.
comments pretty well. Would he be, in your opinion, do you think he would be supportive of this?
Yes.
Okay.
He was.
All right. Thank you.
The things he mentioned were addressed in there also. Councilmember Hagelson?
Thank you. The thing that I have, and I mentioned that earlier in our interviews today, and last time we discussed it, when the school board has the charge, and they're supposed to do their comprehensive plan every 2 years, and they're supposed to update the data, and I understand the concept of this, but I'm wondering if it's hopefully it's not used as an excuse to say, well, we're working on it. We're not cutting things because we're going to be working on it. This last, our budget meeting, a lot of things we're saying, hey, we're not cutting any employees because we're working on a task force. Now, once the task force is there, we're not going to do anything. We're not going to consolidate schools. We're not going to do anything with changing attendance zones and whatnot until after the report is given. So hopefully this isn't going to be utilized as a way that delays things that need to be done. The schools right now are behind on their reports for the comprehensive plan. And hopefully, as I mentioned to Dr. Edwards just yesterday, that they will provide those figures that is needed for November 1st this year, so they're not, further out of compliance, so.
And actually, what you just said was mentioned during leadership meetings, because the schools have moved forward on strategic planning. And as a part of their strategic planning, they do have certain plans that are in place, certain research. So this work will be in alignment with the work that they are ongoing. So they're doing the work, some of it, and moving forward. The task force, because the question was asked on their side, are we to halt what we're doing right now to wait on this to catch up with it? And the expectation is no. They are moving forward on the things that they are expected to do. This task force is more of a community alignment with working with that and the research and all of that has to come together. So to answer your question.
So when they come forward in November and they come up with their comprehensive plan, and as they're meeting and they say, hey, based on these figures and based on the law that we're supposed to adjust, maybe they're going to recommend and promote closing a school before this task force comes together? I mean, is that, and they're not going to say, hey, well, we got to wait till the task force?
Well,
That what we're in the assumption of, or?
Yeah, I'm not going to say that that's what they're going to present, but
I'm not
they
saying
are
they're going to
working,
present it,
right,
but if they find that to be, when they look at the credible
Right.
evidence of the decline,
right. They're not going to wait on presenting anything like that, right, or getting to a conclusion.
And to me, it would just be more data for the task force to review.
Exactly.
and, because typically the school board, I mean, I recognize they're a political appointment, but they should make things objectively. And so sometimes they make an objective analysis, hopefully, and say, here's what we need to do. And then it comes back to the political side where council says, hey, we agree, or no, you shouldn't close this school because of, whatever. And so is that going to be thrown off the tracks any?
I don't want to say no, but I can't say what they're going to come back with right now. And so all I know is that we do know from sitting with them in joint meetings for the past year, or a couple of joint meetings, that they are working on a strategic plan. And so that work is not being halted because we're doing this committee, task force. And so, but it will be in alignment with what they come forward with, where they end up at that point when the task force is actually meeting. So
And so
I
they're-
think it's what you're saying, it's what you're expecting. That's what they're going to continue on to do what they need to do.
And so what does this do then separately?
Well, for one, it's a broader conversation because the city owns the buildings. And so, okay,
I think the timeframe on the school strategic plan that they're doing right now is a 5-year plan. And we had thought about this as a 15-year plan, maybe it's 20 years, whatever they decide on. We think, the superintendent actually echoed the same concerns that you're mentioning. And so we want to make sure that this task force, the report, is ultimately informed by the school strategic plan, but also informs future strategic plans for the school system as well. So I think we all share the same concern.
And so it's not going to be a redundant
That's right.
committee, it's just,
Yeah, we want to make sure all the documents are talking to each other.
so if you got a 5-year on the school's comprehensive plan, and this one is 10 or 15 or 20 or whatever, that's going to kind of coordinate. And so they could make recommendations to consolidate in the meantime.
Yeah, absolutely.
yes. Vice Mayor, did you have something?
No, I was just going to say, we had that discussion with Dr. Edwards.
In the leadership, so, yeah, we had that.
Nobody else saw it, so that's what I'm asking.
Right. All right, so the motion's been made. Is any further discussion from those who made the motion or second? All right, please cast your vote. And the motion passes 6 with 1 absent. Thank you very much. All right, it is 4:49.
We're ahead of schedule.
We are ahead of schedule, and so let me find my language for Ms. Craig. Do I have that language in front of me? I have so much. Okay, because maybe that's it.
It's in that other packet.
Okay, thank you. Consideration of a closed meeting to discuss appointment of steering committee members to the task force on the future of education, pre-K 12 and beyond, pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A of the Code of Virginia, as well as appointments to the following boards, commissions, or committees: Blue Ridge Regional Jail Authority, Central Virginia Community College Board, City Employee Appeals Board, Code Enforcement Task Force, Economic Development Authority, Historic Preservation Commission, Local Emergency Planning Committee, Martin Luther King/Lynchburg Community Council, Metropolitan Planning Organization, Museum Advisory Board, Sister City Liaison Representative, Virginia First Cities Policy Committee, and Youth Services Citizens Board. May I have a motion to go into a closed meeting?
Second?
All right, the motion has been made and second. If there's no discussion, please cast your vote. Thank you. Motion passes 6 with 1 absent, and we will now go to the back for the closed meeting.
We're going to do this 3 more times?
Yeah.